Hey guys, Dr. Michael Young here. Thanks for joining me today. We are moving ahead into our next chapter. It's a very exciting topic. It's one that people are interested in usually. It's leadership. So there's a lot of material in this chapter, and I have to admit I don't have enough time in my little brief introduction video that I usually do to introduce it all. I'm just going to skip over, talk about some of the more important parts, and try to get you excited in it. And so as you study for your quiz for the exam, you'll have a broad overview, but it's up to you to dig out the details. So, right. Leadership. Of course, we have a definition. We're defining leadership as a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. An effective leader. You can be a leader. Trying to do this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be effective. To be effective, it requires a mix of traits, competencies, and interpersonal attributes. From contingency theory, you know what contingency theory is. Contingency theory means it depends. It depends on the situation. From contingency theory, we know effective leaders match their choice of behavior to the situation. So it depends on the situation. All right. And again, I'm going to use myself as an example. I like to think of myself, my role as a professor, as being somewhat of a leader. Maybe I'm deluding myself, probably am, but nonetheless, I like to feel that I inspire and push students to go a little bit beyond themselves. That's what I try to do in the classroom. It's much harder when I'm doing it online, though. So moving right ahead, this is where we're headed for this particular topic. We are going to look at several aspects of leadership. So in your textbook, we have this figure 13.2. Figure 13.2, we're calling this an integrated model of leadership. So here we have the leadership behaviors. Okay, we've got these different factors that are leading into these leadership behaviors, and we've got leadership effectiveness. And notice here, this diagram is it's a flow diagram. Notice here we've got this dashed line showing that there's a direct relationship between these. So you've got this moderated relationship, but you also have a direct relationship as well. And so let's look at all these different things. We've got demographics. You know what demographics are: age, gender, ethnicity, those sorts of things. We've got intelligence and skills. We've got task-oriented traits, which we're going to look at a little bit more in just a minute. We've got interpersonal attributes. All of these are leading into these leader behaviors. Is the leader task-oriented? Is the leader relationship-oriented? Is the leader passive? Is the leader transformational? All of these things will influence the leadership effectiveness, but of course, it's moderated by the situation. You have to, there's no cookie-cutter formula that you can just apply to every situation in your life. You have to, probe and change and reflect and adapt your leadership behaviors to the situation in order to be more effective. Leading is not necessarily the same thing as managing. Managers, I'm not saying that one is better than the others. Managers are needed. Managers implement, plan, organize, and control. There's an old saying, managers keep the trains running on time, right? We have a city manager. Manager walks around with a clipboard, implements, plans, controls, makes sure the trains are running on time. That's the manager. On the other hand, we might have a leader. The leader inspires, influence, creates the vision and strategic plan. Now these overlap somewhat, right? They may overlap. And depending on personality and style, surely a person can be both. But this is just saying they're not necessarily the exact same thing. So as you might have guessed, over the years, researchers, people like myself, professors, have tried to find out what it is that makes leaders effective and ineffective. So one approach to this is, as you might have guessed, let's look at the traits of people. Are intelligent people more likely to be effective leaders? What do you think? Is intelligence something that causes leadership? As you might have guessed, there's a correlation, but it's not a perfect correlation. It's not always the most intelligent person that turns out to be the leader of the group, as you might know from your own experience. Dominance, if a person has a dominating type of personality, are they more likely to be a leader? What about self-confidence? What about the level of energy and activity? What about the task-relevant knowledge? All of these factors have been explored under what's called the trait approach. Later research on traits, as you might have guessed, research became more sophisticated, and say intelligence is something that you might think of immediately, right? That's a trait. Some people are more intelligent than others. People began to get more sophisticated in their research techniques, and so they began to look at more sophisticated types of personality traits, like emotional intelligence, communication skills. And you may have heard of something called the Big Five personality test. I know we have some psychology majors in here. This is the Big Five: are conscientiousness, open to experience, emotional stability, extroversion, and agreeableness. All of this yielded better and more sophisticated, more, let's say, more important and telling results than did the early stuff. Now, since I've been a professor, I've had a lot of my colleagues begin to look at what's called the dark side of management. And transformational leadership can be used for good as well as evil. So there are some dark side traits for leadership. These traits, however, are negatively associated with leadership effectiveness. Narcissism, Machiavellianism. That's a very long, difficult word to hear, but it's a word that if you do much reading in the area of politics or psychology, Machiavelli was a writer back, I want to say in the 16th century in Italy, and he wrote about how to use, dark traits, manipulation, in order to get ahead. So Machiavellianism is a term that people use to say this person is manipulative and political. And then, of course, psychopathy. Psychopathy, it derives from the word psychopath. This is people that have no guilt, no feelings, no empathy for others. Now, these are called dark side traits. These can be used to manipulate and cause people to do stuff for evil ends. Here's something interesting. Yeah, this kind of makes sense when you think about it. Men lead differently from women. Or we might say women lead differently from men. We just saw Ketanji Brown Jackson. There's a Jackson Brown who just recently got, I apologize, this is new to me. I'm going to have to learn this name. Her first name is Ketanji, our newest member of the Supreme Court. So this makes me think about the advances that women are making in lots of things. But anyway, back to this. Male leaders are more likely to be task-oriented. They're more likely to be autocratic. They're more likely to view themselves as effective. Female leaders, on the other hand, are more likely to be relationship-oriented. They're more likely to be democratic or have a participative style. They're more likely to be viewed as being more effective by peers, managers, and direct reports. However, they're viewed as more cohesive, cooperative, and learning-oriented. Moving on from these traits. Gender is a trait, right? Demographics. The next style to looking at leaders is looking at their style, their behavioral styles. And According to this research, there are 4 broad categories of behavioral styles. A leader can be task-oriented, that is, they focus on the task. They can be relationship-oriented, that is, they focus on the relationship. They can be passive, allowing their followers to choose their own path, or they can be more what we're going to call transformational. Transformational leadership is a special category in which the leader tries to push his followers to go beyond themselves, to transform them into following the leader's vision. So, what can we take away from this? Well, behavior is more important than traits. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, it depends on the behavior that you have. This is what the research tells us. It also tells us that leaders can be developed. Leadership can be improved and it can be developed. And it also tells us that there's no one best way of leadership. There's no cookie cutter approach. Even effective leaders have to change their style of leadership based on the situation. Next thing we're going to talk about is a particular researcher. His name was Fiedler. And I remember studying this years ago when I was an undergraduate student. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about this, but realized that Fiedler identified 3 dimensions of situational control: the leader-member relations, the task structure, and the position power. Next one we're going to look at is a theory called path-goal theory. This was developed by a guy named Robert House, who I actually had the chance to meet one time. I met him in Hong Kong. He was doing some research in Hong Kong, and he stopped by our university. He had an eye patch. That's the reason I remember him, is it reminded me of a pirate wearing an eye patch. But according to Robert House and path-goal theory, leaders are seen as effective when employees view them as a source of satisfaction or as paving the way or paving the path to future satisfaction. How do leaders do this? By reducing roadblocks, by providing guidance and support, and by linking rewards to goal accomplishment. So let's look at the diagram that demonstrates this visually. Pull myself out of the way here. All right, so here we go. Figure 13.4. This is a representation of House's path-goal theory. We've got the leader behaviors. We've got the employee characteristics. We've got the environmental factors. And then we have the measures of leader effectiveness over here. Behaviors include things such as clarifying the path, achievement-oriented work facilitation, supportive interaction facilitation, group-oriented decision-making, representing and networking, and value-based. But this depends. We could say in research terminology, we say that these are both moderators. It depends on the employee characteristics. It depends on their locus of control, their taskability, the need for achievement, experience, the need for clarity. We have the environmental factors, the task structure, the work group dynamics. This leads to leadership effectiveness, employee motivation, employee satisfaction, employee performance, leader acceptance, and work unit performance. So this is a nice representation, figure 13.4, of Robert House's path-goal theory. I'll let you dig into the details of that on your own. Next type of leadership we're going to look at is a special type. It's called transformational leadership. Transformational leaders motivate followers to pursue organizational goals over self-interest by using leader behaviors that appeal to their self-concept, such as values, motives, and personal identity. In other words, to be associated with something beyond themselves. 4 key leader behaviors for transformational leadership. They have to inspire inspirational motivation, idealized influence. They have to have individual consideration and intellectual stimulation. So what do we have next here? Right, here we go. Figure 13.5 shows us transformational leadership. We've got different things here, and remember, let's focus on the outcomes first, all right? Transformational leadership, wanting to have increased individual goal and group performance, positive work attitudes, increased individual and group creativity, innovation, finally, reduce stress and turnover, increased organizational citizenship behavior, increased customer service, positive perception of leader effectiveness. These are what we're shooting for, the outcomes. So let's first jump from there. This is what we're trying to get. Let's go here and look at the person situation factor. We have the traits, we have the life experiences that affect the leader trait effect, and then we have organizational culture. Then we have the behavior model. Remember, another push was the behavior. You've got inspiration, idealized influence, individual consideration, intellectual stimulation. So what's the effect? Followers in the work groups, increased self-efficacy and collective self-efficacy, increased identification with the leader and work group members, increased perceptions of psychological empowerment, perceived organizational support, increased positive effect, increased perceptions of task influence, increased perceptions of organizational justice, increased trust and liking with the leader, increased perceptions of positive climates and work group processes. So here we go. Putting it all together. We've got the person situation factors, affects the leadership behavior, this affects the group, which makes the outcomes more positive. All of this is a comprehensive model of transformational leadership. Last thing we're going to look at is followers. In order to be a good leader, you need to have quality followers. What do people want? What do the followers want in a leader? They want someone that will foster significance and give meaning to their work, foster a sense of community and respect, make them feel engaged and energized at work. What do the leaders want from their followers? They want people who are reliable, who are productive, who are honest, who are cooperative, who are proactive and flexible. This can also be said for professor-student relationships, right? Professors want students who are productive, reliable, honest, cooperative, proactive, and flexible. Get the picture? All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up. That's the end. That's all we're going to do today. Thanks for being with me today. I'm looking kind of rough. I could use a shave, huh? But anyway, this is Michael saying catch you next time.